because I was going to run for the Senate, but because my kids were in a preschool that was unfunded by our state legislature. I was young, they were real little, and I went to my state capital, Olympia, 100 miles from my house, and never been there. And went in and said, you can't cut this preschool program. And I had a male state senator say to me, you can't make a difference, you're just a mom in tennis shoes. And put me down. And so that is really what motivated me to get in politics, run for office. It is what's motivated me throughout my career. When we have huge policy issues, I listen to people's stories because that is what makes good policy. And it also shows them that their voice matters. That's what a democracy is. Every vote counts. Every voice counts. And if you're not listening to them, you're not making the right kind of policy for our country.
You know, being the first, whether it's one or the first in a group, oftentimes means you're the only one in the room. Talk about how you and your colleagues in that year, 1992, and since then, have supported each other.
Well, Barbara Mikulski was in the Senate before me, one of the two, and she was darn determined not to be the only woman. So she actually put a session together of the new women senators, all 6 of us, and said, there's no book to tell you how to be a senator, or how to make policy, or what the rules are, or how you get things done. And she was determined to help us understand what the appropriations process was, how you get things for your state. And brought us together, and out of that evolved the women coming together quite often to have dinner together to talk, Republican and Democrat, to which we still do today, not as often, it's harder, we're a bigger group and a lot going on, but to listen to each other as people and to understand, like, oh my gosh, you too had to run to the store in the middle of the night because your kid was sick, and how'd you do that when you're doing all this? I mean, real personal stories. When you get to know somebody that way, then that's called supporting each other.
So the Republican women and the Democratic women are still going out to dinner, getting together to talk about
it. And often it's not out, it's at somebody's house.
There you go. Makes sense. I want to talk about your role on the Appropriations Committee in particular as Vice Chairwoman and former chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee. How do you balance the national priorities with state-specific needs, particularly when it comes to family, science, and infrastructure?
Well, I come from a very diverse state, so it's pretty easy because a lot of the priorities of Washington State, we have agriculture, we have high tech, we have Amazon, we have Microsoft, we have, a lot of things that a lot of the nation has. So knowing those priorities brings it to me. But I'm going to tell you the same thing I just told you. Going back and listening to my constituents about what their priorities are. And I'll give you a great example. When I go home, I don't care if I'm talking to the CEO of a business or my next door neighbor. The number one issue I hear about today is childcare. Because they can't go to work, they can't get a job, they can't get a promotion. How am I going to do this? Oh, my kid's sick, what do I do? Those are the personal stories that every woman and a lot of men understand and share. So when I hear that, I know it is not just a priority for my state and my neighbors and my friends, it's a priority for the nation. So when I get into that appropriations room and we're talking about the labor age bill, I make darn sure that childcare is funded to the highest level we can. And the people negotiating with me now know that, so,
Right. And we hear so much about these we often call them kitchen table issues like child care, infrastructure, etc. I think a lot of us here in the room, we live in the greater Washington, D.C. area. We're in a bit of a bubble, follow a specific news cycle that's ever changing.
By the minute,
literally, I could check my phone after this and something could have happened. Talk about, I guess, the difference between, in news consumption and priorities between people in your constituents in Washington State, and those of us working here in Washington.
Who live, breathe policy and what's going on and who said what and why. At home, people are really focused on just trying to make sure their family's okay. The stress I hear from people today is overwhelming. I don't care if I'm in the grocery store or going for a walk or, anywhere I am. People come up to me constantly right now and they say, I'm so scared about what's happening in this country. And that fear is really the chaos that they're seeing. It is everything from price increases. All of the tariffs hit my state very hard. Coffee store owner told me, he goes, I'm just going to have to go to business, I can't afford coffee anymore, and I can't raise my prices. Everybody will go away, and oh my gosh, I have to lay off 8 people. I mean, these are the things I hear constantly, that fear. And by the way, today's fear of what the heck are we doing in Iran, and what does that mean to me, and how are we gonna get out of this? And, you know, I have a son that's in the military, is he gonna be okay?
Yeah.
That stress is huge in the American conscience today.
Right. What are you telling, you know, those moms, those constituents who are thinking about these issues?
Well, first of all, it's a very hard time because I'm a Democrat. I'm in the minority. The majority is in the Republicans in the House, Senate, and the White House. And I am somebody who listens to people. That's what I believe my job is. And I'm constantly, for the 30 plus years I've been here, saying, tell me your problem. Let me see if I can fix it. And this last year, the hardest thing for me is I can't fix it because this administration doesn't even talk to us. Doesn't even allow me to call up the Department of Education and say, we've got a school here that needs this challenge. Can you work with me to see if there's some fun? They don't return our calls. So my personal challenge is I can't say I can fix this, but you know what I can do? I can be a voice for that person. And so many people say to me, thank you for saying what you just said. You said what I would have said if you'd been there. And if I go back to when I first started, the one thing I wanted to make sure I did was say the things everybody else who didn't have the chance to be here said. And that's really important today.
Another big thing I hear from Democrats when, you know, I ask, what are you guys, what can you guys do at this point with Republicans holding a majority is, well, we can get people to run for office. We can encourage people to take that step, whether it's at the local, state, or national level. But, you know, as someone who's covered women in politics for quite some time, you know, one thing I constantly hear from women, you know, considering getting into politics, whether they're Republican or Democrat, is it's almost like they have to be asked to run.
You know, I ran the DSCC twice. And I went out and talked specifically to women to get them to run. And I've talked to men to get them to run. And there is a difference. There's a major difference. Men go, oh, sure, I can do that. And women go, God, how am I going to take care of my family? How am I going to raise the money? How am I going to have the capacity to do this? And how do I make sure I'm really good at this? They ponder those questions. So I think for good reason, and it helps them be a better senator when they get here. So I think that is good, but it does mean you have to take the extra time to say, yeah, you can do this.
Mm-hmm. When you say, yeah, you can do this, what are some reassurances you would give those women?
Well, I always tell them my story because when I ran for the Senate back in '92, my average donation was less than $20. And my opponent outspent me. This will sound like nothing to all of you now, but I only raised $1 million and he raised $3 million. And I tell them, you have to raise money, but there are people who will help you. I was stunned at checks that people sent me. I mean, I'd open up the mail and go, oh my God, this woman wrote me this letter and sent me a $100 check. And, you know, people will open up and help you because they want your voice to be there too. So, you know, that, yes, it's a challenge. It is work. It is hard, but it is part of it. But remember what you're trying to achieve at the end of the day is to be there to be a voice for people and to fight for the things that you think are important for our country.
We have just